Hi, Speech 1315, and welcome to another lecture video for this course. Today we are going to go over, I think it's chapter 9. It is chapter 9. Chapter 9 on presentation aids. So I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. So up until this point in this course, you have not had to use any presentation aids. I think that the main reason why I don't require them for an online course is truly just because a lot of times I don't get to see them very well. Sometimes it can be hard to present them in a room with 6 of your friends or family members, depending on where you are presenting at. So I don't require them for an online speech class, but I think it's important that I know it's important that you understand how to create an effective presentation aid for this course. So let's jump into uncovering that and why. First and foremost, presentation aids are a huge advantage to your speech because they basically bring a speech to life. So for example, if I'm talking about ice skating and, I'm giving this really imagery-based illustration of what it's like to be on the ice when no one else is on the ice, and just have a Zamboni on the ice and it's just you and the Zamboni, and getting really, imagery and illustrative with it. It would be beneficial to have some type of visual aid to help support my claims. And so I might post a picture of this, but essentially presentations bring your speech to life. Off cuff, I think that presentations, and I believe I've mentioned this in another video, are a really great tool for note taking. So I'll get to that here in a minute, but I just wanted to reiterate that. There are different types of visual aids. One form of a visual aid is a line graph. So, if we wanted to talk about COVID deaths per quarter among 4 largest countries, it would be ideal for me to have a chart versus me just say, did you know there was 120,000 COVID deaths compared in the second quarter, and then there were 80,000 deaths in the third quarter, but that was for China. And then for India, they had always under 20,000 for the first, second, third, and fourth, right? Just use the line graph to help share that image of what you're trying to communicate. Similarly, you can do this with a bar graph or even with a pie chart. You can also use drawings to help you understand what you're talking about. So for example, if I was discussing different time zones in America, this would be a really great example or visual aid to put on a PowerPoint to help listeners follow along with me while I talk. Also, it's important to note, and I think I've mentioned this before, but there are 2 types of audience members. There are ones that listen and there are ones that read. So before I ever, and I'll get to this again here in a minute, but before I ever explain this picture, there's probably someone who's trying to uncover what is being communicated with the picture, right? And similarly, if I had a bunch of text on here, that someone would rather read the text before listening to me. And as much as we like to think that our minds can do both at the same time, listen and read at the same time, they cannot. So, and there's studies to prove it. Just ask me, I'll find it, I'll send it to you. But essentially, you can't do both. Another type of visual aid is a photo, video animation, objects and metals. So this is where, let's say you are giving a presentation at a conference and you have a booth, you might bring all of your objects and metals, or a coin, like your physical coins, to show people as a visual aid. You can use yourself and other volunteers to be visual aids. Magicians do a lot of card tricks and to show their magic and to communicate that they can do magic. This is a form of a visual aid. And then the infamous PowerPoints or Canva slide decks, or whatever you may call them or use at the time, depending on what project you're doing or who you're working for. But there are some common etiquette and visual aid preparation for speeches. You can see in this PowerPoint that it's pretty clear to never carry your Social Security card in your wallet. I don't have to read through a lot of text. It's very eye-catching and it's engaging. The words are big enough for me to understand. I get the gist of what this slide deck is trying to communicate to me. In your PowerPoint slide decks, you want to make sure you really make sure you really need PowerPoint. So for example, if you're discussing the problem of the mafia and you're saying it's bribery, murder, and extortion, you don't need a PowerPoint for this. You just need to tell us the solution. Okay. So sometimes it's better to just say what you need to say and versus making a PowerPoint. So you have to be the one to critically think about what's necessary and what's not for your audience members and for yourself. You want to choose images over text when possible. So for example, if you are, I'll just use the solar eclipse example right in front of me. I was trying to think of another one, but I'll just use this one. So if I was talking about the problem of solar eclipses, that Earth is engulfed in a shadow cast by the moon, which fully or partially blocks sunlight. Sun, Earth, moon are aligned, sun fully obscured by moon. I can say all of those things by just posting a picture right here. And this will cue me as the speaker to talk on these main points. The only time I would include the bullet point and the picture is, let's say as a speaker, I'm practicing my speech and I'm quickly realizing that whenever I get to the slide deck, I keep forgetting the first main bullet point. I don't know why, but I just cannot remember to reiterate it every time I present it. And so I might put that one bullet point versus all three up on the board to help remind me of my main point that I'm trying to present on associated with my picture. Remember to use text sparingly. So obviously, if you look over to the left-hand side in the problem, it's very hard to read versus in the solution section, it's pretty, you can just glance at it and it says the same thing as the left-hand side. You want to use your text sparingly. So in the solution side, they have very minimal text. I always recommend the 4x4 method. I've heard 4x5, but I recommend 4x4. What this means is for every 4 bullet points you have, you only have a max of 4 words. So you have no more than, you can have less, but you have no more than 4x4 on a slide, one slide of your PowerPoint slide deck. Make sure to format the text for easy reading. So here on the left-hand side, you can see that it's the same thing as the right-hand side, saying the exact same thing, but the right-hand side looks significantly better because it is formatted correctly. So be mindful of formatting. Choose templates carefully. It's better to have a cleaner template deck than a busy one. So if you can see on the left-hand side, the slide with all the flowers on it is a problem because it's hard on the eyes, whereas on the left-hand side, it's a little bit easier on the eyes. So keep it as simple as you can with also being effective to your message. Similarly, it's important to avoid visual clutter. If you notice on the left-hand side, there's a lot of photos, whereas on the right-hand side, it's just one photo and it simply says Chicago. And again, it's easier on the eyes. There's a variety of different media for visual aids. You need to be mindful of how to use them. If you are unaware of how to use one of the media platforms for visual aids, it's important that you arrive to the place where you will be giving a speech in advance to practice using said technology. But for example, some media that you can use for visual aids is a multimedia projector. So if you are unfamiliar with that, a lot of times you may have to insert a flash drive or plug in an HDMI cord from your computer to the main projector. You name it, you might have to do it. There's different boards. There's smart boards. There's, you could do posters, flip charts. You could also do handouts. These are all different types of media forms for visual aids that accompany your presentation. Now, when we discuss preparing visual aids, there's some key things I want to kind of hone in on as we wrap up this presentation. You want to choose visuals that support your speech. So if I was giving a speech on the solar system, it would be really weird for me to have a picture about cats, right? Unless I was making a joke or something, but essentially you want your visuals to support your speech. You want to prepare and practice far in advance. This is not something you do a week or a day or two before. You need to make sure that you have the presentation prepared enough in advance. You choose an appropriate amount of visuals. Like I said, you don't want a cluttered screen, but you also don't want every single slide within your slide deck to just be visuals. You need to I always like to personally switch between the two. If I have a slide that's really heavy text heavy, the next slide will most likely be an image and an image, maybe a bullet point, but not much more. Make visual aids simple and clear, and then aim for back row comprehension. So if people in the back row of the auditorium or wherever you are presenting wouldn't be able to understand what your presentation slide deck was saying, you probably should adjust that slide deck. Be mindful to choose colors carefully. Don't put red on green or green on red. So for example, this is also really harsh on the eyes. Red and green is also another type font color that can really mess with people who have color blindness. Same with blue and purple, or colors that are very similar. So you can never go wrong with black and white. You want things that are going to pop, but just be mindful of how the colors read and if they match well on a slide deck. Use safe colors, black on light color with red for emphasis. Like I said, black and white. Presenting visual aids. You want to make sure to choose the best time to show visual aids and never circulate visual aids, like I mentioned earlier. So you don't want to use the same visual aid over and over and over again unless it makes sense to your presentation. And you want to choose the best time to show them within the presentation. It's important that you explain your information as well. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier too, in terms of text, but especially when it comes to graphs. So for example, I wouldn't just go on a rampage talking about something and assume that you have read this. So I would walk you through the table and say, hey, this table is about the length of time needed for decomposition of various products in a home. For example, a paper towel, it takes 2 to 4 weeks. A paper bag is 1 month, a newspaper, 6 weeks, and on and on and on I would go. And that helps you, again, as an audience member, not only understand and comprehend the content on the page, but it helps you follow along with my presentation. Remember to show one visual aid at a time. It would be weird for me to show this, like 3 different graphs on one slide deck. It would be hard for you to read. And think about the person in the back. They may not understand that. So it's important that you show one visual at a time. Don't talk to your visual aid. You want to talk to your audience members. So you don't want to say, so this slide is showing, I think this slide is showing this, right? You want to say, as you all can see, this slide is showing this, right? You don't want to talk to your visual aid. This is also kind of insinuating, not in kind of, it's also explaining that you don't want a standalone deck. I apologize. A standalone deck is when you basically, like, let's say I sent you this slide deck and everything I'm going to say is on the slide deck. That is not good. There is no reason for the speech at that point. And you probably have sent them probably like a 30-page Word document at that point. Might as well. Instead, a non-standalone deck is one like this, where it's like, if you don't watch the video, you won't understand everything that's included. It's very much quick and to the point, and you have to listen to the speech to understand it. Also, when presenting visual aids, plan for emergencies. So things will go wrong. For example, you may plan on having a visual aid, but something goes awry the day of and technology falls apart and you don't have a visual aid. So plan for not having a visual aid. Plan for a video not working. Make sure to go well in advance to make sure that the videos are loaded correctly and that sound works. But essentially just plan for, if something can go wrong, it will go wrong, and just make sure that everything won't go wrong. And that all comes from preparation. But even sometimes with preparation, as much as you do it, you still run into hurdles. So just prepare for them. You want to appeal to other channels. So other channels in terms of sensory channels, so hearing, right? So you want to make sure that, excuse me, let me take a drink of water. This is, when I look at this, it reminds me of a persuasive speaking class I took where, and as many of you know, you have to do a persuasive speech for this course. The best persuasive tactics adhere to all of the senses. So hearing, taste, smell, sight, and touch. And so think about how your speech can appeal to all other senses. So what can you do for hearing? What can you do for taste? What can you do for smell? What can you do for touch and physical activity? You can use multiple channels. So for example, let's say you're trying to persuade people to use Lysol. In a speech, you might go around the building and spray Lysol all over the place for subliminal messaging. So just think of other ways that you can appeal to other senses. And as always, we conclude with a tip for your career or tips for your career. Never let visuals substitute for your speech. Like I was talking about, you don't want a standalone deck. You want to be able to, you want the speech to be an asset, like a piece of jewelry, right? Like it heightens your features. It doesn't pull away from your features. Ask a friend to assist you. So I always like to practice with a friend and see like what they think about my slide deck. But friends can often really help you understand if slide decks make sense and if they're beneficial and useful for your speech. And with that, that is all I have for you today. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.